Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Friday, October 20th, 2023. Back by popular demand, our intelligence roundtable with our good friends Larry Johnson and Ray Mcgovern. The weight of that combination and the danger it can bring, Larry, with the money flowing out to the industry strategically spread around the United States in various states and various congressional districts, many of which were mentioned by name last night by Joe Biden.
Right.
How dangerous, I know we're going to get to the Gaza hospital in a minute, but how dangerous was that speech for peace in the world?
Yeah, no, he was lighting a match to a pile of dry kindling, setting it on fire, not tamping it out as he should be trying to do. We're at a stage, and Ray and I talked about this yesterday briefly, because I'd asked him, I said, do you ever recall, since the creation of Israel, a time when the Arab and Muslim world have been so unified against Israel and supportive of the Palestinians? And he told me, no, I've never seen it. Even going back during the 67 war, the Yom Kippur War in 73. So this is consequential. Remember in the past, Hamas was a pariah as far as Egypt was concerned, because Hamas or its predecessors murdered Anwar Sadat back in 1981. So Egypt never had any real love at all for Hamas, and would soon go out of their way to pour gasoline on their flaming corpse if they could. A similar reaction from Saudi Arabia. But now you're seeing the Saudis, the Iranians, the Egyptians, the Moroccans, the Turks, Syrians, Jordanians, Yemenis, Pakistanis, Iraqis, they're all coming on board, condemning Israel, demanding, not requesting, demanding a full state nation for the Palestinian people. I think it's going to eventually happen.
So, Ray, our friend and ideological colleague, former Congressman Ron Paul, has argued that Hamas has won already because its purpose was twofold. One, as Larry just pointed out, to unify the Muslim and the Arab world around the concept of a Palestinian state, and two, to draw Prime Minister Netanyahu into such a serious, severe overreaction that the world will, not Joe Biden, but the world will condemn him for it. Agreed, Ray?
Well, yes, with reservations. Thousands more people are going to be killed before that happens. With respect to what Biden said last night, it was delusional. I wrote a tweet earlier this week saying we have no wits about him. Well, all he has is twits about him, like Lincoln. Okay. Now, who's telling him that he should cite Madeleine Albright's dictum that we are the indispensable country in the world? My God. Now, she's the one, of course, that said, well, 500,000 Iraqi children below the age of 5 killed because of our sanctions. Well, that's worth it. People know that. So I had found out that Biden, in a private conversation up in Maine a month ago, cited Madeleine Albright and the indispensable nation. I had no idea he still would say that in a major speech like this. It's there for the world to see. Now, the other part of your question had to do with what?
Netanyahu, showing him at his worst.
Well, Netanyahu has...
Like George W. Bush after 9/11, grossly overreacting and slaughtering innocents that had nothing whatsoever to do with 9/11. Same with Bibi.
The question is, Bibi has a personal stake in this, okay? That's why he had to acquiesce in the acceptance of these extreme right-wing people in his government. He's going to end up in jail if he loses this one. I do think he's going to lose anyway, but I would stop short of Ron Paul, and I'd say before he loses, he's going to try to pull the temple down with him. And that's not only delusional, that's really dangerous.
Not to raise your blood pressure, cut 9, Chris. Joseph R. Biden on, didn't you guys know we are the indispensable nation? I mean, it sounds...
On Ukraine, I'm asking Congress to make sure we can continue to send Ukraine the weapons they need to defend themselves and their country without interruption, so Ukraine can stop Putin's brutality in Ukraine. They are succeeding, backed by U.S.-led coalition of more than 50 countries around the world, all doing its part to support Kyiv. What would happen if we walked away? We are the essential nation. Meanwhile, Putin has turned to Iran and North Korea to buy attack drones and ammunition to terrorize Ukrainian cities and people.
So, Larry, I don't know what political base he's appealing to with the essential or indispensable nation.
Well, we got to give him credit for one important thing, Judge. He managed to sort of alienate every possible group out there. I mean, I was listening to some of the Jewish Americans complaining about his speech, and nothing else. The fact that Israel's only getting 14% of the money, and Ukraine's getting like 64%. And I guarantee you, when it gets into the Congress, that number is going to be flipped. They're not going to give Ukraine more than Israel. Israel goes to the front of the line. Ukraine goes to the back of the line. So, Biden is to be this out of touch and to be so delusional as, Ray noted, because Ukraine is not winning. Ukraine is losing. And Ukraine has lost in terms of manpower. And on top of it, the United States, as Lloyd Austin said, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Hell, we can't even afford the pack of gum. We can't supply Ukraine with what it needs. And now we're going to supply Ukraine and Israel. It's just,
so
I've never seen anything like it.
But that Congress will give him that $100 billion. I think you're right, Larry. And Ray, jump in on this. They may adjust the relationship or of how that $100 billion is divided. But the war party in the Congress will give him that money. They'll borrow the $100 billion at 5% from the Chinese. I don't even know if the Chinese are interested in investing in it. So they'll borrow it somewhere, and then they'll borrow more money to pay the interest on the borrowed money. I mean, they will do what no business or household could possibly do and expect to get away with.
Well, you're right. You're right, Judge. And if further proof were needed, Janet Yellen has confirmed what you just said. She says, she's the Secretary of the Treasury, for those of you who don't know. We got plenty of money. We can finance 2 wars, maybe more. Well, hello, it's not about money. It's bad enough borrowing money to finance dumb wars, but Biden, too, has this personal stake in not losing in Ukraine and appearing to be a devout devotee of Netanyahu. So I come back to this personal danger that they both sense, and it's real enough. And so they're going to do what they can. And I dare say I fear for the fate of the Palestinians in Gaza and for the fact that they're not going to get away with this time. I think Hamas and the Iranians are going to stoke the fires here. There could be a wider conflagration, and that's what we ought to try to prevent.
Colonel Mcgregor warns about the Turks, Larry.
Yeah.
And their long-standing animosity towards the Israelis and just looking for the spark, and they may have gotten the spark, even though they're in NATO, as are we. According to McGregor, they are fierce fighters with a huge and sophisticated military, larger and more sophisticated than the Israeli. McGregor also points out that half the Israeli military are reservists.
Yeah.
Untrained you can talk about this, Larry, untrained in guerrilla warfare. How are they going to enter the streets of Gaza and shoot against people that don't wear uniforms?
Yeah, they're whatever training they have in urban combat operations is not adequate or sufficient for what they are likely to face. And I think that's been one of the reasons there's been such a delay in Israel retaliating, because I think it is a genuine concern on the part of Israel that this could be a trap. If Hamas lures them in there, they've already created enough rubble that Hamas fighters will have what's known as cover, that they can hide behind objects that will stop bullets from hitting them, but yet be able to pop out from behind that and fire at Israeli tanks. Some of their anti-tank guided missiles will go up to 500 yards. These are going to be combat engagements within 50 to 75 yards, if not closer. So it's not going to be a long standoff. And the shift in Turkey, prior to Erdogan, there's actually, I thought, a pretty good relationship between Turkey and Israel in cooperation, but not now. And in fact, the Pakistanis the other day offered to give Turkey nuclear weapons if they get into a confrontation with Israel. So they're often to share what they have.
Are nuclear weapons transferable from one country to the other, just like you would ship 155 millimeter artillery shells?
Yes. Yeah. Just you put it on a plane and fly it over. So I mean, what's frightening about this is that they even mentioned it in public. This was not like it was an intercepted private communication. They made a public show of it. So again, I keep returning to this, and Americans need to understand this, because Americans are being fed such a load of propaganda about the noble sainted Israel, the terrible, evil Palestinians, and it's a fairy tale where the Palestinians are the big bad wolf and Israel's Little Red Riding Hood, and we've got to save Little Red Riding Hood. And without understanding that, there's plenty of blame to go around on both sides, but we're demonized them to such a point that we're not recognizing that U.S. influence in the region has disappeared.
Right.
It's vanished.
Ray, I'm going to read a portion of a tweet, I guess it's now called a post, from Dmitry Medvedev, the former president of Russia. And I want you to comment on it. It's long. I'll only read the parts that are relevant. Led by the U.S., the world, this is after the Joe Biden speech last night. Led by the U.S., the world is steadily rolling into a deep abyss. The decisions made clearly point not only to irreversible mental deterioration, but also to loss of the remaining shreds of conscience. These decisions, both significant and minor, are glaring symptoms of the epidemic social disease. 1, Biden has called the money to be spent on other people's death far away from the U.S. a, quote, smart investment. It is about getting additional weapons worth tens of billions of dollars for Ukraine and Israel. 2, Kyiv regime has decided to ban the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, thus cutting its Orthodox Christians off the cradle of the mother church. 3, France's interior minister unhesitatingly condemns a football star for his posts in support of Palestine, not in support of Hamas, in support of Palestine. These pieces of news are varied, but all of them speak of accelerated decay of the very fabric of Western society. Ray Mcgovern, is he right? Does he have a point?
Well, Judge Medvedev, the former president, is the tough cop, okay? He's the one who's allowed to say things that the Russians really think. He doesn't have to be diplomatic. Now, Putin, does he believe these things? Yes, he does. But Putin is circumspect, He wants to be able to mediate this thing. That's why he's been so soft on what the Israelis have done and were about to do. So the Russians look at this for the medium and long term. How will this affect Ukraine? How will it affect what evolves with respect to the Israeli government? And worst of all, how it may redound to an attack on aircraft carriers in the Eastern Med by some crazy Hezbollah or Hamas deep sea swimmer or whatever. Okay, now the Russians have ships in the Black Sea with Kinzhal missiles. That means hypersonic, 9 times the speed of sound, that are within range of those aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, and the one that's coming, the USS Dwight Eisenhower. That should be a deterrent for what the U.S. wants to do in terms of a deterrent posture against Hezbollah. But Hezbollah is not going to be deterred by that, and we'll have to see how Lloyd Austin, in his wisdom, decides to use these aircraft carriers. My God, it could come to a no good end, as the Chinese are famous for saying.
Here's a clip from President Putin. Sonia, this is the one that we looked at before we started the show. So it's about a week or so ago, where he's talking off the cuff about the deterioration of the West and its relationship to the East.
Unfortunately, we can see a sharp deterioration of the situation in the Middle East. I think that many will agree with me that this is a clear example of the failure of the policy of the United States in the Middle East, which tried to monopolize the resolution of the conflict, but unfortunately wasn't concerned with finding compromises acceptable to both sides. On the contrary, it promoted its own ideas about how this should be done, put pressure on both sides, first on one side, then on the other, every time without taking into account the fundamental interests of the Palestinian people, bearing in mind, first of all, the need to implement the UN Security Council decision on creation of an independent, sovereign Palestinian state.
Suppose, Larry, that in Joe Biden's mind, the creation of an independent, sovereign Palestinian state is an idea that is dead.
Yeah, no, I think what you're seeing from Putin is that he reflects what has become not just the views of the so-called global South and the BRICS nations and the Arab and Muslim nations, but the Palestinians are going to have a separate country. They're not going to be part of Israel. And I really think that there is a chance out of all of this process as it unfolds, not in the next month or so, but Israel's very existence could come into question. Just out of what's happening outside of Israel. Putin made those remarks before Tony Blinken went to Saudi Arabia and got the icebox treatment from bin Salman, where he made him sit and cool his heels for about 14 hours.
Right.
And he said all of what he said before Joe Biden went to meet with Bibi Netanyahu, and then was supposed to go with the King of Jordan, the President of Egypt, al-Sisi, and Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, to meet with them to negotiate probably a humanitarian aid deal. All three of them told him to go pound sand. So we've never seen a time in the history of the United States and the Middle East since the end of World War II where a U.S. president and secretary of state are being told, to shove it, go pound sand, get lost. We have nothing to say to you.
Is this, are these dangers, these diplomatic losses and potential military incursions reflective of the Israeli overreaction, Ray?
Well, I'd like to pick up on what Larry said about this interview, and you showed Putin. Now, this was a really important interview, the more so since he was giving it to Chinese media this very day he left for Beijing. So the emblematic shift of the correlation of forces was very clear. I looked at that interview. He ad-libbed for an hour, and I said, I ought to check that. And I double-checked it, and I found out that pretty much everything he said was true. And so I wrote that up, and I paragraph by paragraph said, now, Jens Stoltenberg has confirmed this. Victoria Nuland has confirmed this. Merkel, Hollande, Poroshenko, and Zelensky have confirmed this. And I put confirmed. And what happened? I couldn't get it published. I sent it to a very progressive website where I usually publish, and they said, no, this was too sympathetic to Putin. Now,
Wow. Wow.
if facts are too sympathetic to Putin, where does that leave us?
That's the world. That's the world that the three of us and our colleagues and people that agree with us will be facing until all this stuff settles down. I wish we could go farther. I must run because of other commitments imposed upon me. I love these Friday afternoon roundtables. I appreciate it very much. I think you're both on with me individually on Monday. Have a great weekend. Thanks very much for your time, of course.
All right. Thanks, Judge. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Judge Napolitano for judging